This is not about the captaincy really as much as it is about indicating to Maguire that Manchester United want to move him on. Will it happen?
I don't know. I'm not convinced that he's pushing to leave. Obviously, he's got a very lucrative contract. He was given a pay rise as a result of a clause in that contract. We understand when Manchester United qualified for the Champions League last season, there is interest from West Ham. David Moyes is a fan of Maguire. I personally think it's best for all concerned if he was to move on, but I'm not entirely convinced that will be the outcome.
You said something inflammatory on breakfast this morning, which
Surely
I thought
not.
was unnecessary. De Gea and Maguire were comfortable being part of an underperforming Manchester United team. Where's your evidence for that?
Well, the evidence is in the stats. You know,
No, you said they were comfortable being part of an underperforming team. How do you know they were comfortable with it?
Well, I haven't seen enough evidence in terms of their body language on the pitch to suggest that they've done too much to change the direction of travel. If you look at the great Manchester United captains, let's look at the Premier League era.
Well, this wasn't a great Manchester United team, though, was it?
Steve Bruce, Gary Neville, Peter Schmeichel, Erik Cantona, they all led by example. De Gea, to a point, I think you can look at his own performance and say, actually, barring one or two high-profile errors, he was a fairly consistent performer. Harry Maguire, to me, looks like a player who was weighed down by the Manchester United shirt. He was certainly weighed down by the captaincy, and he hasn't led by example. I don't think he can seriously walk into a meeting with Erik Ten Hag and question his exclusion from the first team.
Maguire played more minutes than anyone else en route to the Europa League semi-finals in August 2020, the COVID season. He played the second most minutes in Europe in the season before the Euros, directly after that in 2021. He was a vital part of a Manchester United team that got to a European semi and a European final, bearing in mind they hadn't won a trophy for 4 years prior to that. He played an England side that reached the Nations League final, the World Cup semi-final and the Euros final. He got injured. He had an incident in Mykonos, and admittedly, things haven't been as good since then. But Erik Ten Hag and many managers before have been playing a right-footed centre-back at left centre-half in a team that lacked any midfield protection and largely without a top-level manager up until the arrival of Ten Hag. And I think you'd agree with that up until last August. Just to slur him and to use him as a scapegoat and batter him is cheap, I think, because you sometimes can just accept he isn't in the manager's plans. The last couple of years hasn't worked out, but just move on.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's best for all concerned if he were to move on. But if you're asking me to sit here and critique Maguire's Manchester United career,
I don't understand.
Well, that's what we're doing, aren't we?
Well, no, you don't need to do that.
Why do we not need to do that?
You don't need to sit there and say that he's been quite happy being part of an underperforming Manchester United team. There's no need to say that, is there?
Well, that's my opinion. We're here to give opinions,
You
aren't we?
thought at one stage that he was a great defender.
I did. I was excited.
In fact, you said back on August the 19th, 2019, I'm having a debate with Sam Matterface. I say Harry Maguire is a Rolls-Royce of a defender. He reckons he is more of a Land Rover Discovery with sat-nav. Who's right?
Well, there you go. You were right. I was wrong. So you knew right at the start that Harry Maguire wasn't up to Manchester United's standard.
A Land Rover Discovery is a pretty good car, but it's not a Rolls-Royce.
I'd call him more of a Skoda.
So you over promoted him at the beginning, and you've just been let down by your own expectation.
I think any fan of any football club, if their club pay £80 million for a defender, they're entitled to have fairly high expectations.
Had you not watched him beforehand? Then you didn't know what you were getting.
And this is what.
And then you thought you were getting a Rolls Royce. So after he got to a World Cup semi-final, you thought it was a Rolls Royce, and now you've changed your mind.
I thought he was a very good player before he came to Manchester United.
Rolls Royce,
and that backs up my point. He has crumbled under the weight of being a Manchester United player. He's not the first player. He won't be the last.
Rolls-Royce. You said it was a Rolls-Royce. Rio Ferdinand's a Rolls-Royce.
But the engine is running on empty, and it has been for some time.
Who's going to be the new captain?
The obvious choice, I think, is Bruno Fernandes, because he did it last season. There's a lot of people who maybe feel like he isn't the ideal candidate, but actually, again, you'll tell me that he played more minutes than any other player in Europe. I think you could see a difference in Bruno Fernandes. He led the press. Okay, there were histrionics at times. We all remember that 7-0 at Liverpool when he didn't cover himself in glory wearing the armband, but I think he would be a possibility. And Casemiro, I think, has gone on record and said that he sees himself as a leader. I wouldn't be against that either.
In terms of the future for Maguire, we expect people like West Ham to go in and try and take him to the club. Is that something he'd be interested in? Do you think it'll be something that happens rather more likely to be a loan deal rather than a permanent deal, bearing in mind the monetary value involved in that new contract, or not new contract, but the pay rise that he got because they got to the Champions League?
It's a difficult one for Manchester United because it's a bad look to let an £80 million signing go out the football club on loan. They would still be picking up a big percentage of his wages if that happened. And actually, they're not particularly blessed in that centre-back area because we know that Varane won't stay fit for a whole season. History tells us that. I thought Luke Shaw proved himself to be a very good centre-back when he filled in last season. That may well be his future, but at the moment he's still the best left-back on the books because I think Malacia has still got a bit of maturing to do. So I don't think necessarily Erik ten Hag is trying to forcibly remove Harry Maguire, but clearly this is a big indication that he's not going to be starting games on a regular basis.
Well, there's
a European Championship at the end of the season, and a lot of England fans are unhappy, despite the fact that he's never let England down. I agree with you on that Maguire continues to be picked despite the fact he's not playing minutes for his football club. I think he's got genuine competition now in the form of Levi Colwill, so I think he's got a big decision to make. Does he want to be starting for England next summer? If he does, I think he has to leave.
Look, he hasn't got genuine competition in terms of Levi Colwill, who hasn't played a minute yet for the England national team.
He's going to have a breakthrough season.
Well, he may well do.
Watch this
but you
space.
haven't. But listen, your last prediction was that Harry Maguire was a RollsRoyce. So let's not predict the future too much. We don't know what's going to happen with that yet. Ultimately, the situation with Maguire is another example of Ten Hag being a little bit more ruthless,
and I like that.
And he did the same with De Gea as well. However, you've got to make sure that you've got the budgetary requirements to make the necessary acquisitions to replace those players. It looks like they're going to get Onana, but who are they going to look to replace Maguire if indeed he does end up leaving? Because let's be clear, this is about getting him to leave, because there's absolutely no reason to have this big public drama unless Erik ten Hag is trying to pull an extra lever to get him out of the club. Because ultimately, if he goes, if they're going to sell him anyway, he's not going to be the Manchester United captain. So you don't need to make a big announcement. He went through the whole of last season without really wearing the armband because he wasn't playing in the first team. Yeah,
I think once again this is Ten Hag flexing his muscle as he's been seen to do. We saw the Ronaldo situation. We've seen that it was his call ultimately not to reward David De Gea with that new contract. And I don't mind that because I think for too long there's been a sort of jobs for the boys mentality at United. I mean, Phil Jones has only just left, which is a ridiculous situation they got themselves into. I think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who was the man who appointed Maguire as United captain, was too softly. I think they need that ruthlessness if they're going to get back to anywhere near the levels that they have been in the past, and there's still some way from doing that. So I'm all in favour of what Ten Hag is doing. And what we're seeing this summer is the board backing Ten Hag. He wanted Onana as the new number one. That deal is now going to happen. He wanted Mason Mount in midfield. Manchester United have paid the money to prize him away from Chelsea. He wants Rasmus Højlund as a new number 9. Let's see what happens there. Then I think the next target actually is Sofian Amrabat in midfield. I've not heard of too many centre-backs who've been linked. But the big test of this Manchester United board, and it's an area they've fouled in time and time again, is moving on players who aren't part of the future. And yeah, I would put Maguire in that category. I think Fred will probably leave, but how much are they going to get back for him? Anthony Martial is a problem. He's got a year left on his contract. He's on massive money and he never scores any goals. United have been bad sellers. They need to improve on that.